Let's kick off with my first question, and this one is for Achal. In your understanding, Achal, why do organizations with silo structures struggle to deploy applications at a fast pace, regardless of whether they are deploying applications on-premise data centers or in the cloud?
So it's indeed right. Like working in silos is something like is a very traditional thing which is happening in like a lot of ages time frame, right? So most of the thing we used to face, there are a lot of challenges which we used to face with this approach. So one thing like communication thing, right? So there's one communication issues, there is a one limited accessibility of like what is happening in your field. So let me address the communication first. So in the communication, let us say your team is working, right? And they are working the silos format, then we don't know what is happening inside the team and work and all. So what is the progress, and there are a lot of communication gap is also like due to this gap we can see like delays of the task and also like misunderstanding of the things and also like misalignment of the features process. So that is also coming as a communication gap and all. Another thing is like limited thing, like limited I would say visibility. So in that visibility what we can see like if the things are coming in silos, right? So the limited means like we don't know what is the progress. In the progress, also we don't have any kind of goal by when we need to finish this out and what are the achievements we have to finish, right? That goal is clearly not visible. So that is also comes in very limited process, which is something is another gap of that. And apart from that, like, so there are a number of issues in this approach, like in the silos stuff. And coming to your next thing, which you're saying, like how we can address this, right? So there are DevOps practices there, which is one of the key thing where like CI/CD is there, like continuous, you can do the integration, you can do a delivery, right? Another thing, you can optimize your servers in some certain scale. Second thing, like you can like have a kind of matrix to define your charter where your team can work, collaborate all the work and all, and come in a one kind of room, I would say, where we can have proper transparency of the things, which we can like make some further progress. If the transparency is not there, then it will be another challenge, like comes again in the silos wala format. And apart from that, like we can also like have a kind of a team where we can work with a proper goal, which we can set the goal. Okay, this is your goal which you have to target. So the visibility also will be clear with the goal, and that also we can like use your cloud and other things, right? So there, the continuous integration, something you deploy, we don't know in the silos what is happening and all. But in this continuous deployment and all, we will be very clear, and in Bangalore, I can see what is happening in Jaipur client and Jaipur team, right? So, or any other places. So it's very transparent to me also to see the progress. As a leader, I have to see like what is happening in my all 4 teams who all are there in Delhi, Mumbai and different areas, right? So to cover this out, to see a proper visibility, that is also should be one of the key things.
Okay, so in synopsis, you said that what we could do is from siloed organizations, we can bring them together by using DevOps,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Dushyant, would you like to add something on this, and do talk about, with DevOps and cloud platforms, how can we bring about a transformational change?
So I think being silos is the common problem we all face across organizations, right? It's the common issue where we lack of communication across multiple departments create issue. So to resolve that silos issue, I think the first thing is to cultural change, right? Because that's the biggest issue we all face, that people are used to work the way they are doing, and now the technology has been shifted, but still the cultural change is the issue. So the first thing, the cultural change is required to make sure the smooth the communication. The second process which we implement is automate the communication. So many times what happens, let's say company is releasing the feature, but it's not been communicated to all the relevant departments. And that's quite a big issue. So many times there are lots of good tools available which automate the communication that we are delivering when we are deploying the ABC feature, the concerned team should be notified that what are the features have been released, and it should be automated, not the manual thing, which happens many times that the manual communication is not implemented process, and then the lack of communication create more issues. So how we can automate the communication where more information will be shared to concerned department, teams, and relevant things. So the issue of silos can be resolved by automating the most of the communication. And there are multiple platforms and tools and technology and that allow us to manage that one. So these are two things which I want to add with Achal.
Thank you. Thanks, Dushyant. So we've heard about, from Dushyant and Achal, how we can leverage DevOps to reduce a communication gap in teams. My next question is for Anil. And Anil, what are your thoughts on how organizations can adapt either multi-cloud or hybrid cloud technologies along with DevOps to drive transformation?
Absolutely. It's a great question. Many of organizations always talk about technology, modernization and adoption, right? So we always need to look at what is the rate of adoption. It's not about, everyone is going to multi-cloud or hybrid cloud strategy. So what is the rate of adoption and what is the value proposition we are bringing to the entire enterprise or organization? So let me talk more about challenges, then I will touch base quickly on the benefits and propositions with multi-cloud or hybrid cloud strategy. 76% of the organizations are adopting with multi-cloud and hybrid cloud model. Right. So with this approach, there are a lot of benefits, especially bringing in the interoperability or integration with multiple platforms, especially integrating with DevSecOps model. Right. It requires a lot of proper communication channels for data to communicate across multiple cloud platforms. Right. Various tool sets. Right. Each cloud service provider come up with a different tool sets. We need to adopt how we establish or accomplish the interoperability between multiple tool sets. And there are several other security and compliance. And the most important part which we face, especially in my organization, is about diverse skill set. Right? So we always go with experts hiring. Right? I hired either with Azure expert or AWS or GCP. So having multi-cloud strategy in the strategic direction, it's always make sure we ensure that we have diverse skill set available in the team. Right? So there are several other challenges we can talk about, but let me talk about what are the value propositions or benefits out of the hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. The most important thing we get benefited out of multi-cloud is definitely flexibility and scalability. You can move across multiple platforms, especially with respect to tool sets, right? So in the entire CI/CD pipeline, starting from planning till monitoring, you need a lot of tool sets, right? So that needs to be interoperated, right? I think we can't fit entire CI/CD journey with one or two vendors. We have to have multiple vendor presence in order to cater to the requirement. And the second most important benefit is about easy to scale, and also having the better security compliance, visibility with multiple third parties would also benefit us to ensure secure data communication between multiple platforms. So I think more things to add on, but I will allow some of my co-panelists to add in. Thank you.
Okay. Siddharth, would you like to add more on top of what Anil has already shared with us?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Selva, for asking the question. Glad to be here and sharing my thoughts with everyone. So I definitely agree with what Anil mentioned over here, and I'll specifically focus on a couple of pointers when it comes to the challenges. So, the most important thing is your resources, the team members who are working in the cloud strategies, right? So there's a definite skill gap that you will identify when you work across multiple clouds. I mean, almost all of us use cloud native services these days, right? So in the backend, it's almost the same everywhere across every cloud platform. But if you have a couple of set of engineers who are working on AWS native services and then asking them to move towards Azure or Google or Oracle for that matter, it requires a lot of effort from the team member, it requires a lot of bandwidth that you want to put into it, right? On the other hand, you might think that, instead of putting in so much bandwidth of our developers of getting this done, I might use the native service of the similar cloud as well. Correct. So that skill gap is important, wherein one has to take a call, what is more important, investing the developer's bandwidth or taking other option for that. Going on with that, the second thing that I would like to mention is, compliance and governance. I mean, because that is something which is completely out of your scope. We as IT engineers and IT leaders can only propose a solution, help the team members do that, achieve that. But when it comes to, signing the NDAs and the MSAs, getting the compliance and governance certificates, it's totally the ball is out of your court. And with multiple clouds, you can have multi-AZs, you can have multiple regional setups, so sending the data across to multi-regions, getting the MSA like I mentioned. So these things are something which, you would want to intervene, but obviously these are business calls, finance calls, you can't do that. So yes, challenges do come, but yeah, having said that, irrespective of whatever you talk about, having multi-cloud options and the strategy is the need of the hour, and I'm sure everyone at this point of time would be thinking on doing that.
Thank you, Siddharth. That was insightful, especially on the compliance side, and data centers in the region or outside the region is a huge requirement, or understanding of that is very important today in the business world. So we spoke about the impact of organizations adopting DevOps and a cloud platform. Achal, this is for you. How do you see adopting these strategies impact developer experience?
Okay, this is very interesting thing. Nowadays, like this DevOps thing is like coming in the innovation of the developer speed, right? Which is very, very important right now. So I can address this in one of the key things is streamline the process. So we have to streamline the process, as in there should be one thing which I already addressed, like CI/CD thing should be there in this process. Apart from that, in the continuous integration and delivery, right, the developer will get a kind of a scope, where they can give kind of their efforts and all. So their speed will be faster. Whatever they write, they can do the deployment easily. So that will be the faster thing with this CI/CD thing. Apart from that, there is we used to say code review thing, right? So developer used to have the code review. In the DevX also we have a code review thing. So how we do, as a developer, write the code, and after writing the code, how we make sure our code is working or not. We do the white box testing or kind of thing, right? So that is something also the DevX team can write up that kind of validation check, where with the same part of control integration, whatever you deploy in the system, the result of the feedback of your code and all will be very quick. So immediately once you deploy your change in your code and all, you will get your answer, boss, you have this much of error, or your code is very clean. So that is one of the key thing which will give the developer faster delivery, because rather than we are just waiting for a quality engineer to test our change and all, and then again we will wait for day or 2 days to get the answer or code is working or not, immediately with the white box testing and DevOps help, right? So that you will get that quickly faster. Apart from that, innovation. So innovation in different things, right? How we can innovate our tools in the DevX. So DevX is like in our Wakefit, right? So in Wakefit, DevX is playing a phenomenal role, right? So they are equivalent to the developer. They are doing a lot of things, lot of tools. They are coming in the system which are helping in the dev efforts, quality. For the DevX, it's not only dev. For DevX, QA, dev, all the things has to be a part of the same role. So we have to make sure as a DevX how we can solve their problems, how we make sure things are sorted in the time plus quality, and how we can innovate these things in different ways, right? So that is something we are doing in that way. And apart from that, mostly in the last I would address is apart from innovation, how you are observing the kind of way the DevOps work, right? So the engineering stuff which they are giving that streamline of the entire process overall. So they are presenting lot of cost as well, like we are doing a lot of AWS costs and other things also. They are innovating different ways to make sure as a leader or as a company, right, how we can give the benefit towards the cost benefit. So all the what are the approaches we can use for cost reduction and all, they are helping in that way as well, as an innovative experience. Yeah.
Thank you. I think code review, which was very needed, because today in the DevOps world we talk about everything deployment and CI/CD pipelines and all, and we forget about the unit testing and the code review bit. I mean, would you like to add something on top of this? Is it good to focus, not focus on developer experience?
Yeah, so while we concentrate on integrating practices, right, it's always important to ensure that we have a DevX, developer experience is utmost important. It's about building the better collaboration, communication channels between operations and development group, right? So I think developer experience is always needed while we introduce or implement multiple practices, right? I think they are the core component of entire journey of CI/CD, whatever we talk, especially at unit testing, SaaS, DAST, performance testing, anything need to be in place with respect to development from planning till build stage, right? So experience is definitely utmost factor we consider.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sujat, can I?
Sure. Yes, yes, sir.
On the previous question and continuing to this question, right, I just want to add I want to leave with you one thought. We talk about cloud and we say that it enables us with infinite capacity, wherever we want, all of it, right? But there is one fundamental thing which we got, which we miss. Anybody from any guess? When cloud arrived, 2009, 10, 11, in our era, there's something which came to us which we all missed. A programmability capability to things which was not there before, right? Today, everything in cloud you can program and manage programmatically. So if you look at hybrid cloud, which we talked about before, right? If you think of an abstract layer where everything of any cloud managed in a common way, because the programmability is there. You talk about Pulumi, you have everything what you can write in any cloud, and it's just an if statement or switch and statement, right? Switch case statement. So then that's a solution. So I just want to leave with that thought of saying, are we using the programmability of cloud, what came into the world, to its fullest? If you think you can manage a lot of challenges what we spoke now with that one solution.
Thank you, Shabbat, for sharing your views on that. So let's shift gears a little bit now and discuss the impact of cloud-native technologies. This question is for Vinay. Vinay, please share your thoughts on how cloud-native technologies help businesses to adapt to changing market demands.
Yeah. So before we delve into cloud native as such, there is a perception that if we shift our workloads to cloud, it doesn't mean that it's cloud native application. When you say cloud native, we are thinking of building web scale applications which are agile, which are scalable, which are reliable. Of course, for cloud native, there are different definitions. If you ask each one of us, we'll have different definitions, but however, we'll stick to the standard definition given by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. They are saying that you have to have some fundamental tenets for doing a cloud native application. One is, of course, it should be microservices based, and your applications or the services should be containerized and orchestrated, and you should have observability. Unless until, and of course security is the, secure DevOps is the another fundamental tenet for cloud native applications. With cloud native applications, you would be able to scale your application to whatever load the market demands. And there are many use cases which you cannot solve fundamentally using the non-cloud native applications, I say.
these can be solved with cloud native as such. Probably there are various challenges associated with it, of course, but I would leave to the other person to take over the challenges.
We'll give it to Sharath. The challenges. So, okay, Sharath, tell me, what's that? He's logged on, yeah. How do cloud-native technologies support agile development practices or, continuous delivery and reliable services? How can we achieve that with cloud-native solutions?
Sure. So let me start with the challenge what you threw of defining cloud native, right? It's very easy. We read it day in, day out. But I'll not give you a technical definition. I'll say it's a behavior and a design principle. Cloud native is a behavior and a design principle. So now let's go back to the traditional definition of cloud native. What does cloud native mean? Develop, build, test, deliver in cloud. Why cloud native? For the speed. Simple words, right? It's a simple speed what we need. That's why and also the simplicity and the abilities out there to be used. So it is cloud native. The minute we talk about cloud native, now you need speed. Now when you have to do speed, you need to have a set process. Now you can't throw everything through that set process because as the size increases, the set process will break. So the fundamental is when you start thinking Redshift. It's not DevOps where cloud native can start. It has to start in your process planning, so basically agile adoption, right? The minute agile adoption, it has to be small, then microservices, right? You talk about microservices, now they need to be deployed. How they need to be deployed? Declarative deployments, right? Now don't think of CI/CD as a tool implementation. Imagine it as a behavioral change, how I want to think. Smaller things, faster releases, microservices, unit deployments, declarative deployments, all of it, right? Second to it, if you really think of my first answer of programmability, a program, now we spoke about breaking silos a few minutes back, right? Yeah, we have broken silos, we have created a DevOps team. Beautiful. Developer is gone, QA is gone, now there is one more team which is DevOps, we have broken silos. If you really look at did we break? We didn't break. After things are written by the developer, then it's again thrown to the DevOps team. Now we think it is DevOps and there is a team called DevOps, so we are broken. Right? It's not. Because, now I am sure few heads will say yes, we have CI/CD pipelines for code. I want to raise a hand. How many of you have CI/CD pipelines for your configurations? Great. But there are enough hands which are not gone up, right? How many people have CI/CD pipelines for your database changes? Right? CI/CD pipeline for the image changes. CI/CD pipeline for key rotations. Yeah, that's the my thing there, right? I'm raising my hand for my team. So if you really look at our CI/CD, DevOps, all of it, now come to cloud native. Sorry, I'm bringing it back to cloud native and the programmability, everything is there. You can control once you talk microservices, immediately the container orchestration, all of that comes in, right? All of that can be also managed programmatically. So if you include all of this, that what makes it the complete CI/CD pipeline, and the current challenge is not with the tool set, it's with the mindset. Right? That's what I want to answer for your question of tools, but it is a mindset which has to change. Second, bring everything for the purpose of being available in a faster fashion and in an iterative fashion, smallest fashion, which is Agile's fundamental principle of INVEST. Independent, negotiable, verifiable, testable. I think everybody of us understand, right? And small enough. So once we get there, I think CI/CD pipeline happens by itself. But when did DevOps start? At least when I had all black hairs, which was 2006, 2007. 16 years after, we're still talking about DevOps and we still struggle how to push configurations, databases, key rotations, code, everything in seamless fashion from where it happens where it has to live. Second, when developers really need a machine today, is this a click of a button where they get a capacity? Are they doing it in their container, in their machine with a container? No, their testing happens in my local. The problem of it works in my laptop still remains. CI/CD doesn't happen just by putting in tools. I think we need to have a behavioral change, thought process change, and use what cloud gives us, which is programmability and ability to control everything via it. So that's where I stop.
So adding Sharad point on, two more things as a DevOps we need to take care, right? One thing is like documentations. As a developer, we used to have the documentation for each and every architectural designs and all. As a DevOps also, we should have like kind of anything. We do DB update, we do a lot of planning of the servers during your peak sale and all, right? So what are the key metrics you are presenting? What are key things you are just taking care of? So everything should be part of the documentations. So it will be a practice of your work and all day to day, right? So it will give you a boost in terms of a lot of different approaches. Go for a next level, okay, next sale or next update during anything, right? What are the key things you already take care and what are the things which you have to take care in the future? So that also will help in the documentation. And adding another thing is like apart from documentation, so in Wayfit we have this as a practice also. So whatever we see a repetitive task, right, we used to do that automate. So in DevOps side, we are automating lot of things which we used to see like in a week. It is coming, then just do the automate and go away for the next problem.
Yeah. Sorry, just because I pushed too hard on the other side of the world, let me also push on the documentation. If an API document can be generated using Swagger, why not just all the process what happened as a checklist within a script of execution? Because I don't want to document any DevOps components even in 2031. That's what I'm saying. I think it's time to push our limits and bring in. So let me for that matter, sorry to I don't have any association with that company, I just love the tool, okay, because it allows me to think as a developer and continue to be a developer when I'm managing the infrastructure of an application. Okay, so if you push it, I think all that workers make perfect sense for us to manage, but all that also can be managed with program.
Thank you, Sharad. Thank you, Achal. This was good insight, and I agree, to a large extent that DevOps is about a cultural change and a mind shift change. And when we were all meeting at the icebreaker, I was telling them that I've been in this industry for 20 years, from ALM to SDLC and now to DevOps. And I cannot say how many years now I've been having the same conversation. So like you, we're growing with DevOps. Vinay, would you like to add something on top of what they've said? Yeah.
So like how you said that
Any tools that you would recommend for CI/CD or anything like that your organization uses?
CI/CD, of course, if you look at it, if you look at DevOps as such, you need to have tools related to automation. The workflow for the automation as such, for the deployment process as well as the development process as such. Maybe I don't want to name any tools here since we have many of our sponsors here.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And of course, we are all concerned about the development aspect as such, but more or less we need to be bothered about the operations also.
Yes.
The operations guys with cloud native applications, they are worried more about the observability part of it, maybe telemetric tools and other things. And they would like to know where the request is going. It is going across multiple layers. How do we know where it has failed? These are some of the things we need to keep in mind. And last but not the least, secure DevOps. Before you containerize it, you need to see that it is secure. So there are tools related to that also. So we need to consider all these aspects before doing DevOps as such.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Moving into segue into, he mentions about containers. So this question is for Siddharth. containers and container orchestration brings a level of efficiency which is fundamental to DevOps goals. Could you elaborate and tell us how these contribute to the success of DevOps teams and the ecosystem as at large?
Sure. So, see, I have a mixed review over here, to be honest. I feel, no doubt, containers are a boon to the DevOps industry, definitely. I can go on for the entire day and I can tell you a number of pointers which have helped in terms of when we have moved our workloads, shifted our workloads to containers. I mean, we are Brazil Games, so we are running almost 80 to 90% of our entire workload on containers, Fargate ECS containers, Kubernetes clusters, etc. But on the other hand, I would also say that it is specifically case dependent, use case dependent. It's not I don't want to promote a fashionable process wherein even if you don't need to have a Kubernetes orchestration, even if you don't need to run containers, Dockerize your application, you can very well run them in a monolithic architecture or EC2, plain vanilla EC2 as well, correct? So I feel everyone should consider their use case. They should deep dive into it, understand, do they actually want to run their application in a continuous environment? Do they need to have all that workload running behind the orchestration tool? You can easily auto-scale your monolithic applications. You can easily put up the flavor of auto-scaling and load balancing. We have so many load balancers. We talk about Nginx, HProxy, Backbone is used to use it. But having said that, no doubt, definitely, I mean, with all the applications, with all the workload moving to containers, there is a lot that they have offered. I mean, reusability of the same space. I mean, if you are using a 2 GP and 4-core CPU or a small instance or a container, you can put in multiple applications onto it. You can use underlying OS to flavor the application from their basic unit cells. Obviously, a lot of auto-scaling, a lot of orchestration, workload management, a lot of, going to that scale where you feel like, I can run 10 pods, 10 containers in the backend of one single application. Those things do come into the picture, these things do help you. But then again, and I'll end my answer with the same thought to everyone that please make sure you understand your use case first of all before you even think of Dockerizing your containers or Dockerizing your applications.
That's a good point. Understanding the use case. Dushyant, would you like to add something further?
Yeah, I think as Cynthia mentioned that either we should go for this or not. But what I feel like in the few years that one of the biggest problem that the container resolve is, as we all as a developer used to say that it is working fine in my system. Okay, so we all used to that, okay, it's working fine in my system, I don't know why it's not working in the client system. And container resolve that problem, right? Because now I have the container which create virtualization in my system, which creates same virtualization on the server, and now I cannot comply that, okay, I have the same configuration at all the environment where the code is executing, so now a developer cannot excuse that one, that it's working my end, it cannot work on the system. And if that problem is that help us to take on multiple situations, right? If that problem of working the code in any environment or the portability is resolved, then we can create the scalable, more better architecture. And as you mentioned that it's not always required to go for orchestration and create too much containerization of building a scalable application, because at the end it's going to increase the cost for the organization, right? So sometimes not required and have the better solution which can be more cost effective rather than just doing the thing for fancy. Okay, so I think that's my take on it.
Thanks, Dushyant. So, if I understood or paraphrased, one of the aspects you said is use containers to create dev test environments.
Right.
Right? Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Vinay, this is for you. How does serverless computing add value to curating the change with cloud technologies?
Of course. Before I move to the serverless computing question, I would like to add to what Dushyant has said, as well as what I would like to say is one thing we're forgetting is with cloud native architecture, the costs are going up day by day. A month ago, my CEO called me and asked me, see, when you compare with the on-prem costs, the cloud costs are becoming higher day by day, and what is that you're doing about it? If I give the answer that, okay, it is giving me agility, it doesn't cut ice with you. So we need to consider the use cases for cloud as well as cloud native applications as such, whether we want to use
containers, whether we want to use K8s and all these things, it doesn't matter to them. All that matters to them is whether you're able to satisfy user requirements as well as you're able to contain the costs. So coming to serverless as such, serverless gives us immense possibilities to do some use cases which are traditionally costly. For example, something like an event-driven thing. Where organization, I come from the insurance industry, a photo comes in and you want to do some calculation or computation behind it. And you will want to have a container to solve this particular problem as such. Such kind of problems can be solved easily with serverless. Of course, developers love it because you need not worry about provisioning and other things, infrastructure provisioning and other things. Developer needs to concentrate on the functions as such. What problem he's solving. With microservices, event-driven services, as well as IoT as such, serverless plays a very big role there. These are the fundamental use cases for serverless. Otherwise, if you use serverless for each and everything, it will blow up your costs. And you would not even know how much cost it is you are incurring, because many times it is running and you would, at the end of the month, you maybe have to see, or there are tools which you can actually observe also these days. But you need to look at the architecture or look at the use cases as such very carefully. And with serverless, there are various other challenges also. The cold startup time and other things. Maybe my co-panelists would.
Okay. All right. Axel, would you like to take up that one? What are the challenges and considerations that one must take into account before choosing serverless computing?
So one thing to very straightforward, which we just address, right, the lock-in thing. So to get the discounting part, like locking is something is for AWS or any other infras, right? We used to have like for 3 years, 5 years, 1 year down the period, we have to lock in that services and all. So that will be a challenge to lock in that, because we don't know in one scale to next scale how it works. So the limitation is that one, because we can't upgrade like this in the lock-in. If you lock in for 3 years, you can't upgrade. And if you upgrade, then there is a different kind of offer for that, and it will be a costly one. So the cost also will increase based on your requirements. If you say, I will upgrade in next month, in that case, the cost of that lock-in will be different, which we have to take it up. So that, like, used to have like the additional amount of your, I would say, budget will be part of this thing. And if you have the serverless across the globe, then it will be very, very, I would say, difficult to manage the budget entire tech. It will be kind of, we are doing a 3x tech budget like this if we are having everything like this. Another key issue is debugging and monitoring of that. So we used to have a very, I would say, like traditional format of the debugging, right? But for this serverless thing, we have to do additional changes towards the debugging logic. We have to address that how we have to do that these services and how the parameters we have to define. A lot of skills we have to improve here, and a lot of changes we have to do to address the monitoring purpose. And apart from that, I say like security also is one of the key things, because in the security, major challenges like the data privacy and kind of authentications, we have to see, like, we have to define different kind of rules to make sure that authentication is part of that thing should be addressed. Apart from that, data privacy also, because it's just coming from, I would say, like the normal traditional thing to a different approach. So we have to rewrite everything, rethink about the different, I would say, newly initiated stuff, right? So it's a kind of something which is not everyone is using that. Not every company does that, right? So we need to have that skill to have that kind of security and kind of debugging, and all the kind of upgradation has to be there. So there are kind of some certain reasons to say for that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Achal. I'm sure this comes from your experience at Bazi Games of, scaling up and scaling down.
I also, before Notepad, I was working with MPL, right? So I have, for doing 5 years, I have used this serverless thing and all. So Bazi is something is like, not my competitor right now, but we were using these approaches, and I was a part of all the tech things. So
I was doing a lot of security things and all the debugging, because we hire one person for this complete set of debugging and all. So one person dedicatedly we hired for that, because it was, we had to shift a lot of things, lot of priority tasks towards that we had to use for in-house. So we hired somewhere external and do a lot of things. So yeah, it's quite challenging this stuff, but it's giving an interesting thing which you just mentioned, right? So seed is something if you want to build something very quickly. So like within a month you want to release it and do some experiments. For doing like experiments and innovations, right? This is something will work super. So that will be a key benefit also for that, not the negative cost, but the innovation and kind of doing the impact is something is really good.
Thank you. Bala, this question is for you. Yeah. How is the adoption of infrastructure as a code influencing the automation of infrastructure deployment and management in cloud DevOps environments?
Mainly this infrastructure as a code, if you are considering, we are keep moving on shift left approach, where the developer has to involving more on this code testing. Even now we are adding the infrastructure also to that now. So how exactly it helps is it actually consistence. So any thing which you are creating the infrastructure, no need to be spending more time on this manual effort. Instead, if you are doing with the infrastructure as a code model, it results along with the code. So any disaster recovery if it happens, okay, so for example some disaster happens, it's easy to run through this infrastructure as a code and bring back the system. That's the one advantage. And if I want to say that high availability, downtime, and even we are talking about multi-cloud, hybrids, a lot of new keywords, technologies we are getting added. So to have that as an effective way of delivery and go to the market faster with consistency and efficiency, infrastructure as a code is one key factor for us. So from beginning we automate that with our automated code. So it will be giving a full benefit to us. That's my...
Thank you. Siddharth, would you like to add something? Yeah.
Well, I totally agree with what you mentioned, right? And there are two specific key factors that I will talk about infrastructure as code. And I'm sure if we take a raise of hand, 90% of the build will just say Terraform. Right, when we talk about infrastructure as code, most importantly, right? Consistency is what Bala mentioned, reusability, faster development, faster deployment, right? You plug them into a CI/CD pipelines along with your code, your infrastructure is getting deployed. The good part is, these tools are mostly cloud agnostic, so it gives you a flavor of integrate with every cloud, work in a hybrid cloud environment, and you can reuse them whenever you want. The second point, personally what I personally feel is that these changes are immutable, right? So you deploy them, a new infrastructure comes up, you redeploy, a new infrastructure comes up. It helps you a lot when there are failures, when there are scenarios of rollback. In these cases, even if you perform a legacy operation, you can get stuck somewhere. But with infrastructure as code and with tools like Terraform, having them as part of your CI/CD pipelines overall shifts the packages very soon. And a lot of manual effort goes out after it. I mean, I'm sure you have to write your own YAML scripts, but with the flexibility that Terraform, for example, I mean, I'm a big watcher for Terraform, that's why I'm talking about it. With some basic YAML scripts, we have modules, you incorporate the modules, they'll do the work for you themselves, and then you just run as part of your pipeline. The overall complexity is minimized over here, and the outcome, the results are very fast as compared to what we have seen in the past.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mainly this, now recently we are started working on industrial 4.0, smart factories, all these things. So there this best practice which we want to follow on this infrastructure support, what we have to do is modularization is there with the things. So the whole company, instead of having a separate code models, we can have a modularization and keep that, and even we can maintain with a Git and CI/CD, all three practices if we are maintaining, it's across the company we can use the same templates. That will be a good practice for us. Also this, the security keys, all these things we can keep it in the key stores.
Oh, thank you. That's good insight.
I just want to add one more thing. I think the generative AI, which I think is a very common word in the system right now, everyone wants to speak. So we have used this GenAI, which is something is there, but we have used in very early stage also. In MPL, I have used this kind of concept to detect the fraud users and all. So because it's a real money game, right? So you can assume like there will be a fraud will be like, I would say, more than your existing users, fraud users will be high. So I totally agree with you. So for that, what we have done, we build a kind of system where we will be identifying the fraud users with some certain AI-driven experience logics, right? So in the backend service, we have built kind of system like we can generate how many users are doing in fraud at different levels. So level is in like the segmentation, I think is a very known word in the any kind of experiment company. So in similar kind of segmentation, we have built the segmentation for the fraud. So different level, different segments for the fraud users. This and with the color coding, right? If it is very red, then it's very straightforward. The guy has to block. But if it is something blue, yellow, and little light yellow and all, so based on the different things, we were generating that experience and giving that logic. Okay, this guy is coming in that bucket. That guy will be part of this role. So that AI was working towards every day. It was like kind of, I would say, it's a police who was doing all the checks and all in the system and giving us a report every day. This is something is the scenario of all the users, which are genuine, non-genuine, all the use cases. So that we have built that up. And that's one thing which we have done in AI. And now coming to my Wakefitwala part, which we have built the Gen AI experience, like building the images and all based on like, let us say you're searching some interesting thing, like you're searching some mattress, right? And in that mattress, okay, this is something you are liking, this orthowala and all. After that, in the next, if you go a little down, right, you will see a kind of AI experience where you will see all the suggestions coming from a generative experience. Like it is something will generate the real-time experience of different kind of mattresses, bed and all based on your all past stuff. Whatever you have searched in the system, like you been in the Wakefit website, and whatever you observe, whatever you like, dislike, based on all your searches, we are doing the calculation and then giving you kind of recommendation kind of experience where that experience is completely personalized for you. Yeah.
Thank you. The previous panel discussion was on, embracing shift left security and how DevSecOps is, becoming a prevalent practice, or at least we are talking about it, right? My question is to Pankaj. Pankaj, how do you see, or how are cloud security posture management tools or cloud native security services being incorporated today in the DevOps processes or DevOps cycle?
So the term that now it is used is DevSecOps.
DevSecOps.
Right? So, and this is an emerging area, I would say, in last couple of years, lots of things happening in DevSecOps area, and especially with the rise in the tools like CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, or the tools whichever cloud provider we are using, they provide cloud native security features. For example, let's say we are using AWS, then security hub they are providing, right? So let's deep dive into like how the things are happening in this domain with the DevOps workflow. So I was going through the demo of Synopsys here outside this area. So everything, where does it start? It starts with the developer system, where you are coding, right? And in order to be more efficient and do a better shift left practices, we need to identify early. So there are tools that were built in bits and pieces, which used to do secure code review, which used to do SAST, BAST, bits and pieces, and they were running in cloud at some point of time. Maybe in production, maybe your services are running in production for a couple of days, they will analyze the logs. Later on, then they will do some alerting and XYZ, and before that damage is already done. Because we are talking about security, and with security,
not only we are touching the compliance area, but it's all about if the scale that you are working, it's all about customer privacy, data breaches, and then again the whole organization life, their every business, everything is at risk with these things. So I believe here DevOps workflow plays a very critical role with the right tools to be integrated in the development pipeline. With the IDE, there are tools that get integrated with the IDE. They gives you security vulnerabilities that is available in your packages that you are using, in your code. And after that, when these tools get integrated with your CI/CD pipeline, then we get to know at various stages which all security vulnerabilities are breaking and take a corrective action.
Thank you, Pankaj. Bala, would you like to add further on this?
So mainly this cloud security posture management. So that generally when we are talking about different clouds, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and the different databases, it's available right now. So all these things we need to make it as a centralized place, and the IT team, the organization IT team, if they have collected information, it is easy for to implement the security postures, the policies across the company. So that way, all these vast rules can be generalized, and they will have a single point of view, single pane of glass view of the overall system and cloud infrastructure. And anything to be changed over there, it can be via the process and security practice. What it helps is the vulnerability informations are getting keep updated, processes are getting changed. All these things in a centralized way, it can be applied effectively. So that's a plus point with this CSPM model.
Thank you, Bala. And I agree, security has to be across from developers to the ops teams, and everybody has to come together, I guess, to start implementing this, right? Your code review bit comes into this according to me as well. All right, so we have another 3 questions to go and about 10 minutes. We'll try to, keep to the time, all right? Dushyant, this is for you. I make a statement and then I have a question based on that. So automation is not really required for DevOps. And now my question, what would be the benefits and challenges of including automation as part of DevOps workflows?
So I think the way DevOps started is more about the developers are building the products, but how it will be deployed faster or go to market on the servers for the users. And there, as you said, mentioned that how we're talking about the DevOps from very early, but still we're talking about the thing, right? And how, in what way the DevOps will be implemented. So what are the automation or scripting tools we use to make sure that whatever we're building is going faster to the user. So there are multiple stages coming in between, right? From the development, going to the deployment, staging, or the different servers and the different teams are involved, and coming to the end consumer. And now how we can automate at multiple levels, that either can be deployment scripting, testing scripting, or all other stages are involved in the part, and the communication which we discussed earlier. So how we can make sure that every stage in the process, which is coming from the development till the end user, can be automated in such a way that the timing which is required for any product to go to the market will be reduced. So I think that's my key always consideration, that how we can automate so that the timing of the delivery for the end user can be reduced. So that's one of the most important aspects in automating anything. There are a number of tools, okay, we all understand, we all have expertise in different types of tools which we use, but at the end, it builds on that one. A second thing which we discussed earlier also, that when say building the teams, right, we used to hire the full stack developer, front-end developer, back-end developer, and now when we started hiring, we extended that full stack development process, right? So earlier the front-end plus back-end is a full stack, now front-end, back-end plus DevOps is a full stack. Okay, so why is it important? Because it allows us to make sure to automate more thing, because our developer manages from the front-end to deployment, and which help us to reduce the go-to-market. Okay, so that's the key thing which I try to focus on.
So this should, in a synopsis, you're saying time to market.
Yes.
Reducing that is, the major key benefit of automation, right? Mainly for you, so while faster pace of deployment is one of the benefits, how do you think automation will affect productivity and reliability of the deployments that you make?
So when automation is implemented in these projects, what happens is the consistency and the test report. So instead of when we are doing conduct manual and that automated, the benefit is we will get a consistent report, can be automated well before, and each releases we will get the results as accurate. Only thing is it should be reliable. That's the next question also you are saying. If it should not be more false positive. Sometimes over automation is also it's bad part of us. So we have to be thinking very effectively that what to be automated, how effectively it can give our productivity using this automation. So based on that, if you are curating this automation effectively, it's really good, a very good productivity. That's my thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Bala. Now to Sharat. Sharat's been quiet for some time. Sharat, what are the emerging trends that are shaping the optimization of application performance and resource utilization in the cloud? We spoke about, and Vinay was speaking about money and costs running haywire. Otherwise, besides this also, how can we do resource utilization better in the cloud?
Yeah, so let me answer it very differently, right? So, how many of in this field feel they are still managing infrastructure as part of their team? Raise your hand, please. Right? Infrastructure, they manage infrastructure, right? Bare metal, 2000, we managed infrastructure. Virtualization, 2008, we manage infrastructure. Today, 23, all cloud, we still manage infrastructure. Do you really want to do it? The first question I started with the programmability. You can allow the system to manage infrastructure by itself. So what to us? If that is what, so that's why I just don't want to internet trend to come into this room. Let's set the trend here, right? How many of us generate 1 TB plus data per day from your ELK, Grafana, Prometheus or whatever? Many of us, right? Or per day or per week, right? Now we know based on data we can predict, and that's what everybody today calls about AI, right? So why not, instead of just doing DevOps and manage infrastructure, why don't you do AI Ops? Wherein you do, if I'm not getting 5xx 37 errors in 1 hour, something has gone wrong. Or I'm going to fail in this service by this hour, right? That's an emerging trend, right? That's what is possible with what's available. So what I'm saying, let us set aside what is already we are doing, automation, containerization. I think we can talk for hours what we can do there and improve further. I'm saying the next year, I don't know the number of times, I think we need to have a session only on AI Ops, alright? That's going to be the next trend what we should look at. Next, I think we have heard cost at least 4-5 times, right? FinOps, right? If you're able to bring down the financials or the cost of what you run, and how that can happen? By predicting. I know that night I have only 100 orders, and between morning 7 to 9 I have 1 lakh orders. So my finance guy need not be told, sir, next year bill will be high, or next month bill will be high, next hour bill will be high. We can predict, sir, today is Sunday, we know by last 52 weeks that this week it will be high. So don't run a promotion today, you run the next promotion, right? So you can be the business enablers. So the emerging trend is AIOps, FinOps. Now comes serverless, compute, edge computing. All that is anyway there, right? It's part of infrastructure. You can always think of microservices in serverless, microservices in edge. Right? That's the next thing which will happen as part of our infrastructure world. So I think it is important for us, all of us, to stop managing infrastructure, move towards managing applications, which is going to add real value, and we will be the business enablers. But today, every every DevOps resource, every leader in this room says every DevOps resource is very critical because we need to maintain our business. Continue business, right? DevOps cannot be a business continuation. Business has to be grown using DevOps, using AOps, FinOps, lots more I can talk about. Whoever is interested, please, we can chat in the corridor, but for me, the emerging technology is all about what's out there, how do we utilize, rather than the trend setting which is happening elsewhere.
Thank you, Sharad. AI Ops it is. The next year's conversation is
I want to add the word there, the proactive monitoring, predictive maintenance, observability, all these keywords now evolving with AIOps. So now we are also already working on that.
Yeah, so I don't know the moment if you've read, Google has actually predicted next 3 days logs and their application when it was maybe was exactly throwing the same error. So you don't need to monitor, right? Because that's exactly the point I said, don't manage infrastructure. The monitoring is managing infrastructure, don't manage the infrastructure. You know exactly after 3 days this is how my logs will look like. So what's the point in managing it, right? Start predicting it, start improving on top of it. I know on that day it was 17% RAM or 80% CPU. How do I make it better? Make it 14% RAM and 60% CPU with the same capacity. That's the key. That's the lever what we will get. How did DevOps started? DevOps started to give out all the levers to the business to manage their business. Are we there? We are not. So why are we talking about emerging? Let us emerge first from where we started.
Sure. Pankaj, would you like to add?
So Sarath covered most of the part. However, few things that recently I started seeing observability exists from a very long time. But in couple of years I have seen lots of buzz in the observability area. And when it comes to resource optimization, performance optimization, applications and all those things, without having a right observability tools, it's really not possible, right? And one thing that and here there are lots of observability tools provided also, and I hope most of you have seen their demo as well. So now we are going on the seasonal. Previously it was like, okay, tell me at the overall level, uber level what is happening. But now we are talking about which line, this part of my code took how much of the time and why. So that the moment we pinpoint every instruction, every statement, every network flow, every component, everything together in an observability, that enables us to optimize our applications, definitely. And that's where it comes the performance, application performance and resource utilization. Another buzzword I have recently started seeing is the edge computing. Most of the people are moving towards more on the serverless to do resource optimization. Obviously, this is a process call that everyone takes, building the scale and the performance, but edge computing is again taking a buzz to make things more performant, more reliable. Yeah.
Thank you, Pankaj, for touching base on edge computing. Coming to our last question, and this is again a segue into FinOps. And this is for Siddharth. Siddharth, how do organizations or how do your organization effectively manage costs and optimize resource usage while simultaneously maintaining operational efficiency?
So that's a very different and good question to discuss overall. In my understanding, I mean, obviously when you talk about optimizing costs, there are multiple things which are available. I mean, you talk to people, they tell you, if you're completely cloud native, you use your savings plan, you use reserve instances, or otherwise they'll tell you, why don't you do EDPs with us, you do vendor commits with us, we'll give you so much amount of discounting, etc., etc. Then the cloud themselves will give you a lot of options to optimize costs. Use smaller instance, use Gravitons, you don't use AMD, use RDS, etc., etc. I won't get into that. What I want to raise over here a point wherein this is something specifically what we at Basilians are doing right now. We have shifted our focus of cost optimization not from the cloud service perspective but from the developer perspective. Why? Because whatever you're putting into cloud is generating cost for you. Right? If you use your lambdas, if you run them, if you run 40 lambdas, invoke them every day, 10 times a day, obviously it will incur cost. If you are running your workloads on containers and you are upscaling, obviously it will incur cost. Now the focus should be on how is your the application being developed and optimized in a manner wherein even with a workload of let's say 10 times what is normally happening, you can still work on along with the same efficiency. You can still make sure that the amount of logs being ingested, the amount of metric data being generated is still under control. I mean, there's one use case which we are solving currently with our Kubernetes cluster, and last year we shifted 60% of our EC2 workload onto Kubernetes. I mean, it was earlier on Fargate, we moved back to EC2, and now it is on Kubernetes. So obviously, when you go and you use a new service altogether, you want your observability platforms, your logging monitoring, everything up to the mark. At that time, you don't give a thought that how much logs will be ingested, how much metric data will be ingested. That will eventually 6 months down the line will come into your face when your management will ask you, hey, where is the number going? Right? This is what happens with us right now. So now what we have done is that it's not about you use GKE or you use EKS or you use your own managed Kubernetes. It is about the application that is running under the core of it. How are you putting the logs? What is the configuration of your log4j? What is the configuration of your Fluentbit? What is the configuration of your dumping your applications? Are you only enabling logs at error logs, debug?
We have a code functionality and unless we can translate the source operations into dollar value. We can't hold developers accountable for what they should, whatever they are doing, building. And we need to do that, and we have started doing it. The moment you put like someone says, for an example, one service is running at 20% utilization for most of the time, and it's burning $1,000 a month. And it's serving only 10 requests per day. Let's ask the developer boss, we need to have this observability, right? We need to have this dollar value. But what you have built, can you explain? 10 requests per day, 20% utilization, and you are burning $1,000. Let's have a discussion. Unless we move to that culture, cost is not going to be in control. In the cloud, definitely cloud is a sea, you can say, and not one team, it's not possible for one DevOps team or one infrastructure team to keep an eye. It's not possible.
Correct.
We need to hold accountable.
Sharat, yes.
Yeah, I think one summary, at least I want all of us you guys to think. Curating the change, that's what the name says, that's what I was looking at, right? The change can only be curated when you question the status quo. And also let me tell you, I'm sitting there with a lot of gray hairs. What I learned is bare metal when I came out. What you learned, like at least many youngsters here, right? You learned cloud first. Then you don't even know that, having a kick into the box and my website going down. I don't think you will laugh at me if I say that, right? So you guys have learned better. So question the status quo needs to be questioned. Then think, why am I doing today? Can we do it differently? Is the capability out there? If yes, then what else I can do with the capability which is emerging? I think with these three questions, we'll all be better for Namrata next year's AIOps and FinOps. Thank you guys.
So I just want to add in the cost and infra wala thing. So it is not only a job of the DevOps, to be very frank. So basically even our in the past also we have done several times with this cost thing, right? So one part is like, even I can give you an example, like we have every day there is a sale around 3:30, 2:30, the time is also not fixed. So we can't have the person to be like set a wait, like increase the server towards the requirement. Sometimes it is 5 lakh users traffic, some like 10 lakh. We don't know the predictions, right? So what we have done, like we have added the auto scale. Based on the scale and all, it will do the auto scale and again do the downgrade. So that is a normal thing which used to have. But that will save some kind of manual cost, not the infra. Infra is anyways taken care. But the manual person will not be wait for that and it will be taken care. But the other part of role is like how we can reduce the cost is something is like we have to, as a
complete engineering, it's an engineering problem, it is not a DevOps problem, to be very frank, right? So in engineering, how we can solve, like we have to see how we can upgrade our system to make that thing, like how that server, which let us say need some 10 servers, how we can make our system to upgrade so it will reduce to 6 servers, right? So then we save 4 server costs. So one of the good example, like in Myntra, so in Myntra what we have done, like we upgraded the technology from Node.js to Golang. So it reduced almost 3x down. So we were using like 6 servers, then after that change we using 3 servers for that. So such a lot of services we have done that in Myntra. So this is one of the example with the tech upgradations. Because it's not only like how you can reduce the server cost and all. You have to think through different approaches to make the system, how you can make sure the scale is up, but the cost is less. So that thing we have to take care of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Achal. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists here. This was a wonderful discussion. We heard from our panelists on how DevOps teams can leverage cloud technologies and cloud-based solutions to drive efficiencies across application lifecycle management. They shared their expertise on how converging with the cloud is about driving organization-wide change in operational processes while adopting emerging technologies. As we conclude this panel discussion, I wish you all a culture of agility, innovativeness, and customer centricity while you thrive in this ever-evolving digital landscape. Thank you very much for your time and your patience.